Hi everyone, my name is Natalie. It's been a long time now. I had not intended to disappear for half a year, I think, but this autumn has been intense and depressing. If you follow me on Instagram, you already know that my dog died at November 1st, and the past few weeks has been very difficult, so I've not been reading much and I haven't really been in the mood to film either. And since I'd already gotten out of the habit of doing so, it was not happening. But now I am off work for the next 3 weeks, and I wanted to return and to start having this dialogue, this conversation with you all that I miss when I don't have it, and that I always intend to come back. That's why I keep coming back even when I have longer breaks. But yeah, so life has been busy, it has been a lot, and I am currently very happy to be off. It's been a lot work related as well, but I really need some time to rest, to recuperate, to reflect on the year, and to gather strength for a new year. So with all that sort of out of the way, to explain where I've been and kind of where my mind is at. If I seem a little bit low, that is the reason. But like I said, I really enjoy this conversation that I have with you. I enjoy being part of this community, and I do think that it inspires me to read more and to prioritize reading more, which is good for me, and therefore I'm back. And today I wanted to do a end of year TBR. These are a few of the books that I've had sort of, some of them I've definitely been saving for the end of the year when I'm off work. Some of them I sort of mentally put on a list to reach for when I have more time. Some of them I've just been really drawn to recently from people talking about them in various channels, or I've just sort of wanted to prioritize them. So we'll see how many of these I actually end up reading in the next few weeks. These are not necessarily all books I think I will read before the end of the year, but they're just things I've been drawn to recently. So I'll start off with nonfiction, which is a smaller pile than the fiction. I've definitely been more drawn to fiction this year in general. I'll talk more about that in a separate video when I talk about my reading year as a whole, and I guess some stats and themes as a kind of recap of the year. But anyway, first I have If I May by A. Milne. I made a list of 12 authors I wanted to read this year. 12 authors I wanted to read something by, or preferably more than one book by, in this year, and A. Milne was one of them. I've been checking off his books in the last few years, especially his nonfiction books, which I prefer over the fiction. I've realized that that is not necessarily controversial, but I know that he's mostly known for his Winnie the Pooh books, the Winnie the Pooh and the House of Pooh Corner, as well as his poetry for kids. I like his nonfiction writing a lot, and I've been reaching for all of them, I think, during times off work. So they've become associated with having more time and relaxing, and therefore I feel very drawn to reading his books around holidays. This one is a collection of articles, I think, that he's written. So it says, these essays are reprinted with such alterations and additions as seemed proper from the Sphere, the Outlook, the Daily News, the Sunday Express, and the American Vanity Fair. So various essays on various topics, as all of his essay collections kind of are, and I really like his humor, his wit, and I enjoy his style no matter the topic. I've read essays that he's written on etiquette, on being a host, on writing cards to people, greeting cards, on book reviews, but I've also read essays that he's written on cricket, and I enjoy all of them, even though I definitely prefer the ones that are more bookish in content. But this one I think I will be dipping in and out of during the holiday. A book that I've been planning to read, I think, since last year, but now it seems particularly fitting, is The Letters of J.R.R. Tolkien, edited by Humphrey Carpenter, who also wrote the biography on him that I read, was it January this year, I think, or January last year. I always read something Tolkien related during the Christmas holiday in particular, and last year I think I started reading the Letters from Santa, his letter collection that he wrote. He pretended to be Santa to his kids and illustrated the letters beautifully, and I read a sample of that last Christmas. But I really wanted to start reading this one and probably have it next to my bed to read a few letters every day. That is the intention. And I have just rewatched the first Hobbit movie, and the second and third I hadn't seen before. So I've just watched them, and I'm planning to start my Lord of the Rings rewatch maybe today, maybe tomorrow, and therefore I'm very drawn to reading this one soon. Like I said, it's a collection of letters, and I really liked the biography that Humphrey Carpenter did, and Christopher Tolkien, I think, also, was also involved in the editing of this. I'm looking forward to it. I think it will be interesting, especially I hope that there are letters that he has written about the construction and the writing process, because he took a long time to write Lord of the Rings, as I learned from the biography, and I hope that there is going to be letters talking about that and the challenge of creating this entire world and language and mythology, all of that. I find it so interesting that a person can invent something so detailed and all-encompassing. So there's this one. And the one that I have been looking forward to reading basically the entire year. Before it came out, I was looking forward to its release, and as soon as I bought it, I knew that I would have to save it because it's such a heavy book that I couldn't be carrying it around. It is Dit Ön by Bia Usma, who wrote another book called, what is the English title for it? Maybe it's just The Expedition. I will put the name of the English translation on the screen. But Bia Usma is a woman who is completely obsessed with a polar expedition that three men did. They tried to travel to the North Pole with an air balloon, the sort of Edwardian turn of the century time period, very early on in the polar expeditions of Sweden in particular. And they were very unsuccessful, of course, because an air balloon is probably not the best way to do this. But she has been obsessed with this expedition for years, and she wrote Expedition, the first book, some years ago. I don't remember when it was published, maybe 2015 or something like that. And this is a kind of sequel, continuation of that research that she's been continually doing. So basically all of her life has been dedicated to obsessing over this expedition, and I loved the first book. In part because I love polar expedition, polar exploration type stories in general, but especially I think because of her obsession. I find it so fascinating that a person can be so dedicated to one subject, especially because I have always felt like I'm very eclectic in interests and hobbies, and I love the idea of being so dedicated to one thing. And that obsession and that passion is really something that comes through in her writing. This book came out in September or October, and I bought it during the annual book fair in Gothenburg, and also listened to her talk about the book, and I've been really looking forward to reading it. And this is also a very beautifully illustrated book with a lot of photographs, documents. Let's see if I can find something. Yeah, various things in this. But because it's kind of a coffee table book, it's very impractical to carry around. So I wanted to read it while I was off on holiday, and I could just be reading this at home. So there's those 3 nonfiction books. So I have 5 fiction books that I've selected, and I think all of them except for one are authors on my 12 authors list. The one that isn't is Marcel Proust. In Search of Lost Time, The Way by Swans is the first part in his series. I think the series is 8 books or something like that. It's not a trilogy, at least. And I've been so drawn to reading this one. I know that I've had kind of a vague plan to read this for a few Christmases in a row and haven't gotten to it yet. But I've been seeing this everywhere on Bookstagram in particular. A lot of the people that I follow on Instagram have been reading this book recently, have been sharing quotes, thoughts, reflections on Proust and on the series. And I've been super drawn to reading it because of that, and especially reading it during the winter, because from what I know of this, it seems to be a very reflective, slow-paced type book. Exactly the type that I associate with winter's slowness, quietness, the kind of somber, melancholy, reflective time of year that winter can be. And yeah, I don't really know much about this one, to be honest, except for the fact that it is one person's life, and this is the first part in the series. It says, The Way by Swans is one of the great novels of childhood, depicting the impressions of a sensitive boy regarding his family and neighbors, brought dazzlingly back to life by the famous taste of a Madeline. It also contains the separate short novel A Love of Swans, a study of sexual jealousy that forms a crucial part of Proust's great masterpiece. I think the memory aspect is something that I've been drawn to with this book in the first place, and Justine from Bookstagram is definitely a big part of the reason why I want to read this. So we'll see if this is the year that I started. Maybe it's going to be my New Year's book. We'll see. Next is a book that I'm planning to start today. I have actually read 3 or 4 pages already, but is going to be my next book, hopefully. That is Beware of Pity by Stefan Zweig. And this is translated from the Austrian, I think, by Phyllis and Trevor Blewett. And this one is translated by Lydia Davis. So this one, again, is a book that I don't actually know that much about in terms of the synopsis. The main reason I bought this originally was because of Wes Anderson, who talked about this book and The Post Office Girl as being major influences in his creation of The Grand Budapest Hotel, which is one of my favorite movies. I've probably already mentioned that I love Wes Anderson a lot, and I do think that his movies can be very stylistic and sometimes maybe too much so that it's style over content. But The Grand Budapest Hotel to me is such a fantastic film. It's beautiful, but it's also like the stories itself I also really enjoyed. And as I said, when he had mentioned that this author and these 2 books had been a great influence, I was immediately interested, and so I bought this. I have also been recommended Stefan Zweig before, and recently, what is her name? Malissa on YouTube also talked about this book and this author in her winter reading recommendations, and again it made me want to prioritize it. So the description says, the great Austrian writer Stefan Zweig was a master anatomist of the deceitful heart, and Beware of Pity, the only novel he published during his lifetime, uncovers the seeds of selfishness within even the finest of feelings. Half Miller, an Austro-Hungarian cavalry officer stationed at the edge of the empire, is invited to a party at the home of a rich local landowner, a world away from the dreary routine of the barracks. The surroundings are glamorous, wine flows freely, and the exhilarated young Hofmiller asks his host's lovely daughter for a dance, only to discover that sickness has left her painfully crippled. It is a minor blunder that will destroy his life, as pity and guilt gradually implicate him in a well-meaning but tragically wrong-headed plot to restore the unhappy invalid to health. So, for some reason, I really feel like this will be a very winter-appropriate book, and maybe that's just because Melissa talked about it, but the tone of this seems very fitting to this time of year, so I'm excited for this. And like I said, Stefan Zweig was one of the authors I had on my list. I've never read him before, but I'm looking forward to getting a taste. Next we have Blue Bamboo by Tales by Dazai Osamu Dazai. This is a Japanese author. This was translated by Ralph F. McCarthy. I have read 3 books by this author before. I love his work. I first read Schoolgirl, which is a novella by him, and then also No Longer Human and The Setting Sun. It's been quite a few years since I read these 3 previous books, but there's something about his writing that just immediately connected with with me, and that made me want to read more. And this is a short story collection, so I'm not really sure what to expect, but I am thinking that maybe I will do a concentrated reading with rereading some of his works and reading this one and one of the other books I have unread on my shelves by him. We'll see. The description doesn't say much. It's just a glimpse into the humorous, sardonic world of Dazai Osamu, presenting a new and very different look at one of the recognized masters of Japanese and indeed global literature. These works from the middle years of his brief career show a skilled hand with angst muted and his penchant for subtle comedy deftly displayed. He was very, very depressed, the author, the author himself, and I think that definitely comes through in his writing, and I think that is also one of the reasons that I thought this time of year would be fitting, because to me, January and February are the most depressing months of the year, and yeah, so I thought it would be fitting to read this. Next we have The Fawn by Magda Szabo, translated by Len Rix. This came out 2 years ago maybe, I think, and I've been meaning to read it for a long time, basically since I heard that this would be coming out. I think this had already been translated into Swedish quite a long time ago, but the English translation came out quite recently. And this one I think is about a actress. That is really all I know. Let's see. Esther is an only child. She grows up in a provincial Hungarian town with her father, an eccentric aristocrat and steeply downwardly mobile flower breeder, and her mother, a harried music teacher, failing to make ends meet in the years before World War II. In a post-war communist Hungary, Esther has moved to Budapest and become a star of the stage, but she has forgotten no slight and forgiven nobody, least of all her too kind and beautiful classmate Angela. The Fawn unfolds as Esther's confession, filled with the rage of a lifetime and born, become to sense of irreversible regret. It is a tale of childhood, of the theatre, of the collateral damage of the riven 20th century, of hatred, and in the end, a tragic tale of love. So you can tell that my book choices are very happy. And yeah, but I love Magda Szabo, as you probably already know by now. I reread the door earlier this year, and it's still just as good as I remember it. Malissa writes female characters in particular so well, and her character portraits in general are always so deeply human. So I love reading her. I always feel like it's such a treat to read her. And I think actually Isis Ballad is probably one of my all-time favorite, if not the favorite, fiction book I've ever read. I've only read it once, so I wouldn't call it a favorite for sure, but it's definitely one of the best fiction books I've read in the last few years. So I am looking forward to reading this, and I've been really drawn to it as I've been seeing a lot of people read it in the last couple of months, and I thought, what better way to close off 2025 than this? And speaking of good ways to close off the year, the last of my picks is The Sundial by Shirley Jackson. It's funny because this has also been on several TBRs and several plans for a long time because it's the last of Shirley Jackson's novels that I've yet to read. I've read all of her novels. I love all of them except maybe the first one. It's not great, but I love her writing. I also love her memoirs. Both of them I've read, and I've read her short story collection, The Lottery and Other Stories. So I still have some of her short form nonfiction writing and probably some of her short stories that aren't included in the Lottery collection. But this is the final novel, and I've been dragging my feet reading it, I think probably because I expected that I will enjoy it and it will be the last that I haven't read before, and I guess I've been saving it subconsciously, but I think that it would be fantastic to finish off the year with reading her last novel, and I am probably definitely going to make a themed month reading Shirley Jackson in 2026. It's something I've been planning for a long time, but I think it would be great to have read this one before so that all of the fiction is rereading, and to read them in chronological order. That is what I would love to do in 2026. And so those are all of the books that I have selected for some things that I would love to read in the last few days of 2025 and probably the first few days of 2026. The end of the year TBR is not necessarily end of year, but more like a holiday TBR. But just some of the things that I've been drawn to, that I've been saving for the time off, that I've been thinking could be good to start off the new year with. Set the tone with great writers, and several of them that I've read before and really loved. So yeah, I would love to know if you have read any of these and your thoughts, of course, but also if you are planning any particular titles you would like to read before the end of the year, or something you want to read during this holiday season. I would love to hear about it, and I hope you're doing well. I hope you're taking care of yourselves, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.